So maybe a brief word on myself before I come to the topic of a common agricultural policy. If this thing works here, seems to be a technical issue. What's the buttons I press? Well, switching it on will help. Okay, good. So, maybe a word about myself. I am a natural protectionist. I'm from Israel. This is why I've got this funny accent. It's not French. And I've been living for 20 years in Germany, in Leipzig. And for many years, I'm a butterfly expert. I'm afraid to say that my pollinators are not bees, but butterflies, but they are affected by the same aspects. I've spent years on working on fragmentation, habitat losses, projects in Israel, in Mata Atlantica in Brazil. And so this is why I have become a vegan now. I've seen how we affect what's going on there, and again we get to the same result. It is agriculture. The reality between these fragments, the so-called nature or semi-nature, is always the same. Urban areas are the smaller areas. The agricultural areas in Europe and worldwide are over 50% if we include planted forests. It's even up to 80%. And even if we think about natural habitats, 38% of these are Greenland. Greenland is agricultural area that is managed. And the main drivers here of losing the performance of ecosystems is, of course, the agricultural use. That means that in between the natural habitats, there's a very, very hostile area where no one can survive. Nobody walks here, not just frogs and other animals. We don't even see humans. And then we have a bigger problem with the effect. The problems grow. It's not just a change of the use of land in Europe. In Europe, we don't have no big changes in the agricultural land. It's already there. The intensive management is too much. We always take out what's there. The soil erodes. Climate change comes with droughts, with extreme weather situations, and the loss of farmers. The fields are bigger and bigger. There's fewer and fewer people working on the land, and we ask different services. We want to protect the nature, and at the same time, we want to produce more food for our cows and cars. And so there's more space used for our cows and cars than for us. 86%, 68% of the space in Europe are not used to feed us, but to feed our animals or our cars. So let that be enough for an introduction. We know about these problems. These are not new to us. You're the experts as well. So let's come to the main question: what has to be done? Since 2014, in the agricultural, there's this ecologic area. There was a study by Kohl et al. Asking, what do the bees need to survive in these systems, in these agricultural areas? And the answer was very easy. We know what the bees need. They need structured areas. They need different things, not just to breed, but nectar resources. Okay, flower stripes. That's okay, but they have to find spaces to breed. The ground breeders dig into the ground, and the ground is plowed, so they need a heterogeneous diversity in the landscape. And of course, fewer herbicide, pesticides, that's obvious and visible to everything. And so what's done to do that? What needs to be done is clear. That's not difficult to do. Glenn Dix, UK colleagues, has published many years ago, 2016, after the reform, what needs to be done in order to change policy, in order to keep and maintain the pollinators or renaturate them. So what we've heard so far has been said, fewer pesticides, diversification, we've heard of that from Jeff this morning already. So it's all quite clear, but there are things that are not so easy. There are participatory research that needs to be done. There are things that are a little bit more complex. And this is why I came to this policy by the question, how can it be that we invest 4.5 billion euros per year in agricultural, this is agri-ecological and climate measures. So agri-ecological measures, so it's agri-ecological and climate measures. Includes payments for organic famine, so which is not sustainable. That's a different way, different story. We also invest in so-called cross-compliance. There is good ecologic farming, GLUTs in EU language, and these aspects have to be covered as well and implemented as well. If you don't, you lose 5% of the money. It's not much. Anyway, and since 2013, or rather 2014, which is the implementation phase, greening, 3 measures that every farmer had to complement or comply with. Great stuff. Thank you. Okay, that's it. So now let's look at the whole story. This is only a part. If we invest 4.5 billion in the protection and 40 billion in direct payments by hectare, and then something that is not the very best may happen, because there's money simply given to the farmers to be farmers. Legitimate, of course. If we hadn't had any farmers, they will sell their property, they lose their job, and we have a problem as well, because we can't do anything with that land. So that's legitimate. We are talking about sustainability here, and sustainability is economic, but we have to look at the overall structure. So for you who are not, those who are not CAP experts, there are 2 pillars. One pillar is the direct payments, 40 billion, depending on the size of the plot the farmer is operating on. The second is rural development program. That's pillar 2, with many, many different instruments. One of them being the AOKM and many others as well, which many people don't even know about. We've got the ANC, areas of nature constraints, constrained areas, and this is 57% of the agricultural areas, or relevant for that. Of course, that doesn't apply to that effect, but it pays into the so-called green envelope, but not for the same goals. And in some countries it's deployed well, and in others it means intensifying the most sensitive areas in Europe, which is a very harmful subsidy. And within the direct payments, it was this link payment. The more you produce, the more money you get. That is a harmful subsidy as well. That's contrary to what we need to do. Of course, but we have to remember that the CAP is there since the beginning of Europe, before the Europe existed, and the official goals of a common agricultural policy is for the TEFO, Treaty of the Function of the European Union. That's from 62, and these 5 goals are the official goals of the Common Agricultural Policy. So you see topics like production, costs, living costs. It has nothing to do with the environment. So over time, everybody starts to understand that the environment is our fallback for our security, for our life. And this is where the sustainability idea arose from. And the good news is that it is now moving into the next level of goals. The reform process have taken 3.5 years, very intensive process, but we have 9 different goals now, and 3 of them are environmental goals. That is an improvement, at least on paper level. So the next one is from 23 onwards, but there were new people getting into the parliament and so on, and there was a lot of change, new commissions, a very ambitious commission, but there are still a few details that we may have to look at, which is, first of all, where does the money go to? If 60% of the money goes to support a living and 11% for competitiveness and much less in the environmental aspects, and there is conflict between the 2 goals, but the various goals, that means we're not effective. On the right hand side, this is the figures by goals, 0 by the way, to improve the position in the value chain. That means keeping shorter, making the value chain shorter. And then, if we look at this, we will probably not deliver these goals. We need the farm to fork strategy here. In this chart on 2019, we evaluated what is the performance as of today of the CAP. From the different SDGs of the sustainability goals, and we do see here in how many different situations it's very, very difficult, especially for the climate. Climate gas emissions have been ignored completely. They were even higher than in some years before.
But it's not failing to work because we didn't know what would function, but due to a watering down of the greening measures in 2013 through the reform process and the last leg of the negotiation process, we inserted options that have no impact or even a negative impact on biodiversity. And of course, if farmers have the option of simply protecting their green areas, then of course they do that. So more than 70% of ineffective measures that farmers implemented. And 90% of farmers didn't even have to implement any greening for different reasons. They were simply exempt to small farms or whatever. A lot of different reasons. I need another hour for that. Now, efficiency. Efficiency means where it works, we make an investment. That's why I cooperate with economists, such as the agricultural economist, Professor Lackner at the University of Rostock. He came up with this beautiful table to see how much do we invest per tool that's relevant, i.e. for the area investments, and so the investments into greening as opposed to actual improvements. And we still invest only a 30th of what we invest into greening. That's inefficient. What's really crass And I learned this through the fitness check that we performed in 2017, where we evaluated the entire agricultural policy, more than 900 papers. We only managed to work our way through 300 of them. But what was really crass was to understand that the CAP is extremely inefficient, above all, for farmers, for their incomes. You what? That's the top goal. And actually, that is the coefficient of inequity. In other words, the bigger the gap, the more money the larger farmers get. So today, 1.5% of farmers get 32% of direct payments. 20% of farmers get 80% of the monies. That may not be the most efficient approach to support farmers' incomes. On top of that, we can see that leases are increased, so there is a intensive competition for the lease of land. That's inefficient. That money doesn't even go to the farmers. They go to big landowners, Bill Gates, whoever, people who buy up land and then use it to profit from it without any actual purpose of it other than generating money. And you can see what happens. We still keep losing the small farmers. That's the drop of numbers of farmers across the EU here. We're losing 2.2 million farmers in 8 years in Eastern Europe alone. This graph will be identical if we normalize everything and look at the Netherlands or Romania. It's still where we have the larger areas, but we have fewer farmers with larger farms. There is some good news as well. Some aspects of the GAP reform. It will be changed in 2023. There are new objectives. That's an improvement. There's a new delivery model, so the implementation model will be modified. There will be more freedom for the countries, member states implementing the GAP. And greening didn't work because we can't force farmers, because if we do, then the lobby organizations will fight that. So instead of that, there's a new instrument, it's called eco-schemes. This complicated image is not designed by me, it's from the EU. We modified it a bit. That's the gap now, and it's after 2023, that's the first pillar, the second pillar, and the main instruments. So we have greening here, then agro-environmental and climate measures that are sometimes light green, sometimes dark green. How light green it will be in the next CAP, I don't know. I can't tell you. We're working on it. So there are still large gaps. But the eco-schemes are an interesting tool because there'll be initially 20%, later on 25% of direct payments will go to those schemes that are voluntary for farmers. So that can actually double the funds for farmers implementing eco measures. And then there's additional conditionality, some new rules, for instance, protecting landscape elements, etc. Right. Thank you very much. And good luck. Before I move on, I have to say there are other instruments that are important as well. For instance, the support of farmers by knowledge support, so farmer advisory extension services, but also non-productive investments into renaturation, for instance. That's very important. Or the re-watering of peatlands, of marshlands. So we evaluated the suggested cap by the Commission, and we published it in 2019 to say, okay, it sounds very good, but it won't work. Just like we had said in 2014, it won't work because it's not enough to move something substantial. That was completely ignored. Then I sent an open letter, and people said maybe we can collect some signatures and publish that. So I said, okay, why not? 3,640 scientists from all over Europe, from all EU member states, about a total of 63 countries, so worldwide. People supported it with suggestions of how the cap could be modified and improved. Better governance, for instance. There were 22,000 downloads after the first day we called for activities. There was a good media reaction. It was published in 2020, and People in Nature. It wasn't ignored this time, maybe because of the 3,640 signatures, we managed to get a bit more activity here. And the good news in this case was a really positive reaction by decision makers across Europe at different levels. We had personal meetings with Vice President Timmermans and also the Commissioner for Agriculture and the Environment. We had a personal meeting with Julia Klöckner, the German environmental minister. I won't talk about it now, maybe later. And what was really interesting was that they invited us to collect more evidence. And they said, okay, you're the scientists from the university, please bring along some evidence, what needs to be done. And after this appeal, we addressed the scientists of Europe, and we organized 13 workshops within 13 months, self-organized, no subsidies received. And we have an online service where we got the opinions from 22 member states, and there were more than 3,000 people involved in this event, people from 13 different ministries listening in. Some recommendations or examples of the recommendations we made. First of all, there is consensus in the science community of what needs to be done. First of all, we need to protect the landscape features in semi-natural areas, grasslands as well. So that's the first suggestion. Then we have to invest into habitat diversity and multifunctionality, because here we have win-wins for biodiversity, for the climate, but also for incomes. We need better spatial planning of where to invest. Otherwise, you just throw money out the window. That doesn't make sense. To develop a global pan-European network of roads and to put roads everywhere, that won't work. We also need to have better collaboration between universities and regionalization. What works in one place mustn't need necessarily work in the other place. Collaboration, i.e. collaboration between different farmers, not only means benefits for biodiversity, but also for farmers themselves. They can network. And last but not least, the most important thing are the farmers themselves. They need to be committed, and they need to be informed about why it protects their own production if they need to implement something, but also in increasing their acceptance for voluntary and effective measures, and then enable people for better activities themselves. I'll go through this a little bit quicker because time is running short. We also made several recommendations on the improvement of certain instruments. For instance, raising standards, enhanced conditionality, that has been done already. And we need to invest more into agricultural and environmental measures because that's we have 20, 30 years of implementation. And we're supposed to implement it there to make sure that it is evidence-based. It can't compete with ACM, and it won't mean that payments are made for empty measures. Okay, and of course we need to have an overall structure, not only the individual instruments. We also came up with a list of what should be put on the list of effective measures and what is not effective or even problematic, such as precision farming, for instance. Well, won't be very helpful for biodiversity, but it will be good for technology and for those who sell it. Then we have more suggestions for implementation. What do the member states, what should they do? Germany among them, of course. We have to well define the targets. They have to define how they're going about it. Better definition, better monitoring, and also talk about it. This transparency is so crucial. As a scientist, I can't get this information if I want to analyze it. I always have to write an email to the ministry waiting before I even get the data, and that takes years. And now let's move on to the political reality, to the question of why isn't it working? Well, in the negotiation process, there are two elements that are involved. The Commission, who work with the suggestion of those who have no interest in biodiversity, but the new Commission has this ambitious goal of working, of improving the environment, so they have to deal with the suggestion. Then on the other side, there's a parliament with numerous different people from different parties with party political interests, and they insert the member state interests, and then 15,000 lobbyists living and working in Brussels. Maybe 20, 30, maybe 100 of those are green NGOs, but the majority are part of the industrial and agricultural lobby. So it's a power play, and this is only a very weak power play because the bigger one happens at the European Council through the ministries, and the lobbies are much stronger within the member states. The ministries are usually representatives of those parties that have less to do with science and more with other interests, and that's very difficult. It's a very difficult situation, very difficult to work with them. What have we seen over the last few years? We really saw numerous demonstrations, and as a scientist, I saw that it's incredible how polarized the debate is, how much misinformation and disinformation there's out there, particularly this distinction between the farming community and the rest of the of society. So 4,000 farmers drive to Berlin, and suddenly Angela Merkel and her government have a different opinion, and 60,000 say we're sick of this, demonstrating, and this is ignored because they don't have the backing of strong interests. A smaller group with a single interest is much stronger, but these divisive lines don't even exist in reality. If you ask the farmers themselves what their opinion is, 67% are environmentally friendly, and they're interested in supporting environmental protection. They're not against society or biodiversity. What the agricultural associations say is not even reflective of reality, but also against the interests and wishes of farmers who would like to, because the lobbies want to make sure that the larger farmers can maintain their subsidies, and then enhanced conditionality is only slightly enhanced, and all those lobbies represent certain organizations. So this is closed now. The next cap will be decided on today or in the next few days, and we can only say what's about the situation now. It's not all black or white, it's more complex. There are some improvements. The conditionality, as I said, was only a little bit better than previously, with a lot of watering down that happened. Eco schemes do offer a potential, but we have to make sure that the potential is implemented. There's also a very interesting article within CAP text that gives the Commission a lot of power to ensure that the member states are actually ambitious. There's a small paragraph, but it's very powerful. A lot of NGOs said we'll use this paragraph, but it's very difficult to know where we're headed. Once it's all dependent on the decisions of the member states. That's the trick. More leeway for the member states. And if they're not ambitious, as they have already shown through the Council of Ministers, then the chances of actual change are very low. It means a lot of work for us. And of course, the devil is in the detail. I have written it in German and English. This is the list of measures for eco schemes proposed in Germany. So there were suggestions by the Environmental Ministry, some very good examples of actually good practices, but then there are some small gaps here. For instance, within unproductive landscapes, for instance, here, 3.5 months to establish green strips between the 15th of May to the 1st of September. All insects lay their eggs. They'll be eliminated after that period. I work with butterflies, and that will have a serious negative impact with them, and this really competes with agricultural, ecological measures that are subsidized as well. I only have a minute left, so I won't go into more detail, except this detail here, use of fewer chemicals. Why does it make sense to pay for 1 year rather than further years, subsequent years? This is only useful if it is extended over several years. So we've sent in our comments as well. Don't worry. But there is a risk in Germany that it won't work out. Now you get a new government. We'll have to see what color, what will be the true color of this new government. What can we do? We can do a lot. If we think that we can do a lot, because we have retained the power. If we know what needs to be done, then we don't need to come in with this polarized debates. We can come in to support, to give our support and to get involved. We need to be politically more committed and read through this legal blurb to understand what's behind it all. This scientific knowledge needs to be used. That is a tool for mediation, not for fighting. It's a tool the tool of knowledge is not only ecological knowledge of what's good for the bees. Transdisciplinary must be our approach. What is good for agriculture, for social requirements, for sustainability overall? Where are the win-wins? And that is where we have been successful in the past, because we always said we're not a stakeholder, we're not an actor. We just want to help. We have the knowledge, and we can inject different aspects of knowledge into this discussion. A colleague of mine, a former colleague, Melissa Mercier, analyzed what are the measures that we can implement, not only in the CAP. There are different approaches to protect pollinators, and we don't use all the tools available for us, including politically we don't. And so there are many gaps where we can become active. No, the sound has changed a bit, it seems. Anyway, during our meeting with politicians some weeks ago, you said, they said, you have the power, use your knowledge, because if somebody of us sees that you have this knowledge, and if you distribute this, if you publicize this knowledge, then we can change things. We need to communicate what the importance is of the pollinators. With climate change, things doesn't move because somebody says, oh, somebody has to do something. With bees and butterflies, we can speak to people through their hearts because they love butterflies and bees. And we say, you can do something in your garden. It depends on your own decision of what you buy when you buy food. If you decide not to support pesticides, so why do you buy something that's not organically grown? Or if we eat so much meat, then of course forests will be locked down to produce soybeans for us in South America. So this is the power that we retain. It's important to communicate this. And of course, there's this a question of monitoring. How many bees are there? Where are they? And in Leipzig, at the University of Leipzig, we started with a project, Biodiverse Garden, in order to improve the management of our gardens and green spaces. And we need to formulate clearer demands and say, where's the transparency? What about credibility? And I think we all can be active in this context. And I'd like to conclude on these words and thank you for your attention. You have a question? No, I'm waiting for the mic. Mr. Peer, you're still young. Now you're starting to collect signatures. Environmental protection organizations did that 20, 30 years ago. We collected 1 million signatures online to save the bees and the farmers, but the farmers didn't want to be saved, they told me. And where did it take us? To stacks, reams of paper, 22,000 downloads. And I understand that as a scientist, you would be accused of being an activist if you called for action rather than a scientist. I felt that collecting signatures was too little because we had genetically modified plants that were planted in Germany, and we were told that the pollen will only fly 3 meters wide. The Bavarian government told us maize, poppy, their pollen won't fly far, and they told us what will happen in rapeseed. And it's really terrible with cross-pollination here. And we took it to the streets, we discussed it with a colleague, Michael Grollm, here from Weimar, We said, no, it's enough of collecting signatures, as you said, demand. We now announce that if politicians allows genetically maize being planted, we will go out there and rip it out. And I did it. I remember when I was in Munich, a nature protection agency, Bund Naturschutz, had a demonstration where a number of people participated, 3 members of parliament and a couple of newspapers. And that was the crucial thing, the newspaper. And I announced at the time the government is planting genetically modified maize, and I'll rip it out, and I call on you to do the same. Next day, it said in the newspaper, chaos, terrorists want to destroy maize field. I was sentenced to a prison term of 80 days. Demonstrations, tractors in front of the courtroom, etc. I never spoke about it publicly, because what would have been the good? What would have come from it? I felt like I had survived 2 attacks. As soon as you move away from collecting signatures and take action that is actually effective, industry will watch your every move. And I'm not the only one who suffered this. This only stopped when Bayer bought Monsanto. Since then, these things are not as visible anymore. So I tell you, if you were grow a bit older and you'll stop collecting signatures, right? But there is some good news, luckily. These signatures and the media coverage actually led to politicians talking to us, and they did change something. We really managed to get some changes into the political text, indicating that something will have to be changed, and we're still in a close contact and communication with different federal states in Germany. We need a bit of support in Thuringia, by the way, in this state of Thuringia here. So we do have some contacts, but the Agricultural Ministry of Thuringia hung up on us. But in other states, we have good contacts, we have good meetings. Less than 2 months ago, with the Ministry of the Environment, and they said, okay, we're interested, we need time, how can you support us for this collective implementation of CAP? So, okay, you need more time. That's legitimate, because right now things are happening very fast. But we also sent our comments to the Green Party, and they will try to implement our ideas, include our ideas into the strategic plans, which have to be submitted by the end of the year. And we'll see where we can shift a few things. So now we'll send it to the FDP, the third coalition partner of the future government, and then it'll work. Yeah, that's not a joke, because at the end of the day, we're not partisan, and we have met people of all parties, Julia Klöckner as well, as I said, and there were numerous stories there. But with every party and in every area, there's a narrative that will help. The narrative of liberty with the FDP, and if we use this narrative, then there won't be any pushback against collective measures. As a scientist, we have to see where's win-win options and where is there little pushback, and where we have pushback, then politicians need to get involved in order to neutralize this. And we try to look for rules of dealing with these trade-offs by keeping a distance. Yes, I'm an activist. I'm an environmentalist, but I try to find the scientific results that are necessary. That's why I'm still doing what I'm doing, because I think that this is needed, this knowledge. I also brought along the same gift that the others got, the vegetable oil, the olive oil with glyphosate, but that is decomposed after time. Yeah, I'm still young, so I can wait.